Are you willing to be hated? Are you willing for people, and I mean, of course, I don't want anyone to hate you, but are you willing for people to be like, no? On the other side of that is going to be ravenous fans, right? And I'm not going to mention what I'm working on, but you know what I'm working on and kind of my fears around that, even in the name of it. It gives me a lot of anxiety, but that also kind of tells me like, I think I should do it, right? So I don't want you to think about like, oh, I have to create something that people will hate, but I want you to think about how can I create something that people will have a reaction to? Like, is this something that anyone would be like, tell me more, or no, thank you, right? Like on the nicest level, would they at least say that?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Beanie and the Brand podcast. I'm here with Sasha Fedunchak. She is a branding and influence expert, helping ambitious founders transform the way they connect, innovate, and lead. As the founder of Haus and Powerhaus Media, she specializes in marketing strategy, storytelling, and high-impact visual branding for beauty and wellness brands with a no-fluff approach and a deep understanding of influence psychology. So I'm super stoked to get into this. And I have so many questions for you because you've had some incredible successes with beauty and wellness brands and being at the helm of them or behind them. Welcome. Welcome, Sasha.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on with the queen of brand positioning for beauty brands.
Thank you. That's so kind. All right, let's get into it. So tell me a little bit more, give me some background information around what first got you excited or fascinated by the psychology behind making people say yes?
Yeah, great question. So really quick backstory, because I don't love the intros taking forever. So I know we'll keep it brief, but I got my master's in rhetorical communication after studying anthropology and communication in undergrad. I actually really thought I was going to be an archaeologist. Like that was my life plan, digging up bones, like living in Egypt. Like your girl does not like to get dirty. So I don't know what I was thinking in my late teens, early 20s, but I was always really fascinated by cultures and understanding people. And as an immigrant and someone who's grown up amongst many different cultures, many different countries, even different states, all of our states here are so different culturally. I feel like always felt like an outcast. And so really understanding people was the way that I could connect with them. And so studying anthropology, especially cultural anthropology, opened up this whole new world of, what are people doing? How are they seeing the world? How are they making meaning? I was just fascinated by it. And I luckily had a great advisor who was like, love this for you, but you should also probably dual major and study communication because in case you don't want to dig up bones, this is going to be helpful. And I said, okay.
Wow.
So I did that. And my first job out of college was actually working in healthcare. At that point, then I was like, okay, maybe not the bones. Maybe I want to go into healthcare administration.
Yeah, maybe not the bones.
Right. Yeah. As it turns out, that path seems daunting. And so I worked in healthcare as an admissions director at a rehab facility. Definitely was not the vibe for me. And I thought, I really do need to go back to school. And it's going to be for communication. I found this incredible program through Colorado State University, which really focused on influence, rhetorical communication. So looking at, political speeches, movements, the media, all of those kinds of things. Again, being so curious, I was like, this is perfect for me. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I thought the program itself was great. And we got to teach public speaking at the university level and just really kind of immerse ourselves into understanding how to connect with people. Something like, I think it's kind of a weakness of mine, to be honest. And so it's been something really important for me to study. After that, I found myself in the corporate communication world for many years. I worked at a cell phone case company, I should say. And at a very early age, I was literally the communication right-hand woman to the CEO of like a $2.5 billion company. This is like the cell phone case, like OtterBox, LifeProof. If you know, you know. There's so many people obsessed with those phone cases. And again, it was just, working with him, working with all of the executives. My career really focused around how do we get our employees to continue to be engaged, to say yes to the work, if you will. And so I worked with organizations like Great Place to Work to do employee surveys and analyze data and come up with company initiatives to keep employees engaged, to keep them well communicated to make them feel like they're a part of something bigger, even though we're all just making and selling cell phone cases. And then I moved into different roles, marketing project management. I moved to a different company that was B2B sales and tech. And was worked my way up to a content marketing director there. But, this whole time in corporate, people talk about like wanting to leave and feeling like they didn't really fit in. I loved it. For me, like that corporate environment, team environment, fast growth, I loved. But something just was kind of off for me. And I had a random conversation with a friend one day, said, I think I'm really ready to kind of move past corporate, move past this phase of my career after 12 years. And she said, what about starting a spray tan business? And I thought, are you crazy? I'm like the palest person in the world. I have no interest in spray tanning. And I started to look into it and I realized all of these things that people were doing, I could essentially leverage my career in communications and marketing to create a brand and fill a need that no one was doing in Philadelphia. And I thought, why not? I'll learn spray tanning. I'll build a business. I'll see what happens. And within 6 months, I quit my job. I had a mobile spray tan company, and then I had a salon in Philadelphia storefront, like in like the sixth biggest country, like a 6-figure business within 6 months. It was insane. So I did that for a couple of years, and then we had 2020 and a miscarriage and just all sorts of like personal stuff. And I thought, you know what, this really has been so much fun, but it's not something I want to continue. And I thought, what the heck am I going to do? And I realized I had just built like my first kind of beauty brand. And now all of a sudden I had all these other beauty businesses being like, how did you do this? And so I thought maybe that's what I'll do is I'll just do the branding and the marketing for other brands and other business owners like me. So fast forward 4 years, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Right?
Yes, because that was the same. I mean, similar to you. I had a similar journey. How did you tell me? Like, how did those experiences end up shaping your philosophy or the way that you approach the work that you do in your agency?
Yeah. I think for me, it really all comes back to connection and understanding people. And for a business owner or a business or a brand, that's your customers. And so I think the more you can understand people, the more you can connect with them, the more you integrate yourself with them as a brand. And even if they're not, coming back every single time you have a launch or a new service, like they become your evangelists, they become your brand believers. And so this prioritization of connection and customer, and like for me, it has changed everything as a business owner as well as, for the clients that we work with.
That's interesting. Yes, because I think that's oftentimes what I find when I work with founders, that it takes a minute to register like just how the importance of their customer, their target customer. It's so much about my story and what, how I got here. And it's almost like something that is a form of self-expression. And yet when you are really looking at turning that into, maybe it's a hobby or maybe it's a side hustle, into a business, that shift needs to happen towards the customer, the target customer. So, and connection and making those connections versus, let me tell my story and et cetera.
100%.
So tell me more about, like, from your experience, you've been helping brands, challenge the cultural norms and really stand out from everything that's out there. What do you feel is the secret to standing out in an oversaturated beauty space?
I mean, I feel like from what I know and, listen and hear you kind of talk about, I feel like it's a lot of what you say, honestly. And I think it really is like not just niching down, but really standing for something and really knowing who you're standing with. Right. And so like you talked about kind of removing that this business is my baby and all of the ego around like this is just my passion project that I happen to make money. Like, okay, cool, if you want to do that and sell your stuff on Etsy, like by all means, like have the time of your life. But if you really want to build a business, I think having that shift of removing yourself from it and really thinking about what is the movement I'm trying to create and who am I trying to create this movement for? I think when brand founders get really clear on that, that's when everything skyrockets for them because everything just gets so much easier, right? Like it comes back to messaging and connection and understanding your customer. And then you're typically wanting to then fill a white space and not just like hyper focusing on a formula, or like hyper focusing on your brand colors, things that don't necessarily move the needle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really curious though. You said you mentioned like how in your studies you were like that when you went back to school, you had mentioned like it was that class or that course was about like influence and how major conglomerates, have influence. And then you worked at cell phone cases and you were the right hand to the CEO and really shaping like the influence over the team. Talk to me more about influence and how can you really leverage, how can you build influence, like real influence? Let's say I'm a small founder. I'm a corporate worker who's starting a beauty brand. Like, how do I build influence? And then once I built a little bit of influence, how do I drive customers to take action?
Yeah. Great questions. So I think, with my, with my program and even with the corporate job that I had, that, first job and the connection point I had with the CEO, I've thought about it about a year ago and I was like, oh, it all makes sense. We connected on, I'm sure you're familiar with this. Your listeners probably are too. It's kind of archaic now. Simon Sinek's Golden Circle of Why. And that was, when he initially came out with that, I forget the year, but the year I started this job was like 2011, 2012. And I remember saying to the CEO, like, I don't even think it's honestly like, I'm no Simon Sinek, but I don't think it's just about like people buy why you do. I think it's people are buying like who you become. And I think his mind kind of like melted a little bit when I said that because he's like, you're 23, what do you know? But I was like, no, I actually kind of really believe this. And I think that's been my driving force. So when we think about influence and how these huge political movements from like what happened in World War II to MLK to recent elections, it's not like people aren't just buying the leader, they're not just buying what they represent, they're really buying into what does it mean about me if I follow this leader, if I buy this brand, because we all are the main characters in our own stories. Like, we don't really care about your brand story so much on your about page. Like, we want to know, what does it mean for us? How does it position us closer to that aspirational main character that we want to be? How does it solve our problems? How does it make us feel? How does it help us present ourselves in a particular way to someone else? Because I think at the core of humanity, like, we want to belong, right? Like, we want to feel like we're part of something bigger. And so that's like very kind of like theory meta, but how do we actually apply that as a beauty brand founder? I think we've really got to get to our customer and really consider, like, what do they really want? What problems do they really have? What really is important to them? How do they want to be perceived? When we really understand those questions or those answers to those questions and we vet them, right? Whether we do market research or maybe we don't have any customers, so we kind of have to like make it up and then test it and like see if it works. When we really can understand that, that's where the influence can start to build, because then you're clear on those core messages and you can come up with different messages to support who does my customer want to become. And then we just basically, marketing is marketing 101, saying the same thing over and over and over again, different times. And that's what gets you the influence, right? I think people want to overcomplicate it and do all of these different things and have 50 different strategies and tactics running. And it's like, no, it's actually so simple. It's like, who do they want to become? How can you connect with them? How can you show them that they can become closer to that person if they buy from you? And then you just do it over and over again. Like, it's so boring, but it works.
I love that you said this because I want to put a pin in this for a moment for everyone who's listening, because this is constantly challenged. Like, founders are always wanting to do new, because they want what's new for them. And they actually oftentimes think that it's like, who wants to hear this again? Well, most people haven't heard it. That's the first thing. You may think they heard it because you've been saying it 100 times, but no one else has heard of it. Like they might have heard it it doesn't even matter if they heard it before. It's actually better if you repeat it. And so I love that you're sharing this because I think it's a good reminder for everyone who's listening, keeping the messaging simple. I always say 3 differentiating factors, or 3 stories, and just on repeat, like constantly having that on repeat. And I love this as a reminder. So tell me, okay, you work with Intoxicated Cosmetics and you saw insane growth over this last year. Can you shine light on what did that growth look like, and what was the biggest shift that led to their success?
Yeah. This is one of our, we've worked with a couple of different skincare brands, beauty brands that, have products, but this is one that we continue to work with and just like build upon. So it's so exciting to look at their results. And I do have to just kind of share, I did pull some numbers because I think it's important to know I'm not just making this up, but even in just the last 4.5 months, year over year, we've seen an increase of 726% in their gross sales. Their orders have increased 470%. Their total sales have increased 600%. I mean, they've made multiple 6 figures in just the last 3-4 months. It's insane. Amazing. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of, I literally sent the owner a voice message before this podcast, is their conversion rate on their store is near 6% on Shopify, which the average conversion rate is 1.4%. So that's literally the top 10% of conversion. Yeah, they've had an increase of 245% in their Shopify store just in the last 4 months, year over year, right? So when we look at the last 4 months, meaning, the holidays, Black Friday, Christmas, New Year's, all of that. And we're not even at Valentine's Day. We're running a promo and doing some stuff right now too, but it's insane, And so they've gotten into Nordstrom's. They're getting all of these incredible opportunities. And we made a lot of shifts. This is a client that I actually found her on TikTok and I thought, oh my gosh, her logo is so cool. Let me take a look at what this random, product is. And I just started to build a relationship with her. I ordered some products. I shot them and said, hey, here's some photos, totally random. You can use them, whatever. I was just I feel such a connection to this founder and I know what I can do for them. And she's been in business about 5 years. So, she's bootstrapped quite a bit over the last couple of years, had some good success, but I mean, it literally 700%, just in the last couple of months is incredible. So,
absolutely. So
go ahead.
How did it start, and what were the steps? Tell me the whole story.
Yeah. So for me, the reason that I kind of zoned in and I was I see the opportunity because I feel like a brand detective and a marketing doctor. So for me, I was I can see the potential here and I'm so plugged into kind of what's happening in beauty. No one has what you have from a product, from a formulation, from a POV standpoint. And yet you're not capitalizing on it at all. You're not telling the story, not just your founder's story, but what this product really is. You're not really creating a movement and you can be. And so the first thing we did was a brand strategy and really kind of figuring out what is your positioning. So that was the first thing we did, I think last May, June. From there, we moved into the website. She kind of took everything step by step as a smart founder does. And I take that approach too. I say, I'm not going to tell you have to go and spend $100,000 with me right now and do all of this stuff. Let's see the impact that this can make over time. And so we did the the brand strategy, figured out some positioning. And I found that you're not really talking to anyone. Again, you don't really know who your customers are. You're maybe just talking about the benefits of your various ingredients and, kind of showing some edgy pictures because she has an edgier brand, but it's not connecting with anyone at an emotional level. And that's really what influence psychology and intuitive marketing is how do we bypass objections by just narrowing into the subconscious mind? And the way that we do that is through emotional marketing, just essentially things like storytelling, right? Things really deeply connecting to, again, who people want to be. And so we came up with a couple of different customer personas, taglines, just new messaging in general. But I said, for us to really be able to see this stuff like work. We can't just slap this on some Canva graphics and throw it on your social media and hope that that results in sales. Like, you have to have your website reflect this new direction. If you say you're a luxury brand, which I hate that, luxury means nothing. Like, what makes you luxury? Look at the photos on your website. They don't communicate luxury. You don't even have your products highlighted. It's just like all of this like science-y information about these ingredients that doesn't connect with anyone. It doesn't make them want to add to cart. So along the way, like, I kept painting the picture for her of what was possible, and then she would agree, and then we would make it happen. So when it comes to, her website now, it's just like even the science behind, conversions and like getting beautiful photos where, like right front and center where people can actually see what your products are and envision themselves holding the product. That was really important in the product photo shoot that we did. We didn't want to just have a white backdrop with a photo. Like, we incorporated, dark colors and gold jewelry and like really beautiful models, and all of these things kind of created this aspirational customer that looks really, really different than what you typically see with beauty, like the bright, the colorful, just like, the pictures of the products like floating. And so we didn't want to do any of that. And apparently it has paid off.
I do want to put a pin in this and just for the audience, since they can't see the product, can you describe and tell us what that product is?
Yeah.
I know it's a collection, but the thing that, maybe the best-selling product, because it's all based on like venoms.
Yeah. Biomimetic venoms. So they're basically skin serums that are, they work like Botox, right? It's like her whole thing is bridging the gap between injectables and topical skincare. So like freezing your face muscles, to put it in the simplest terms.
And for everyone who's listening, when you go on the site, it's actually like black, like the background and the above the fold is black. And like you were just explaining, it's a woman holding the product with beautiful gold jewelry. It's very clean, lots of padding in terms of the space on the website. And it has a very elevated look.
And that was important too, because her products aren't cheap, right? So her serums are anywhere, I think, from like 70 or 80 to 115 for her eye serum. So again, it was really important that if you want to charge this premium price for your products, your online store has to reflect a premium look. And we are working on a case study for her, but the before was literally all white, stock imagery of just like black and white. Another big issue was that she had a lot of imagery of animals like snakes and bees and snails. Those are some of the venoms that she was inspired by. And then she would get a lot of hate mail saying, you're juicing snakes, you're killing snails, and all of these things, right? And so if visually that's what we're portraying, people are not going to stop and read the science behind biomimetic, right? That's why we even chose to use words like lab created, because it's easier for people to understand. So those are some of the tweaks in messaging, but also in visuals that we realized we can't have, as sexy as it looks, we can't have a snake slithering through the website. It's just too confusing because we're moving too quickly. And so for us to see those increases in conversions, like, we need to know what turns people off so that we can not do it.
And then you also mentioned like there was a shift in terms of like emotional messaging or shifting the emotion of the customer with the storytelling and the messaging. So what was the messaging that really touched people on an emotional level?
So what we worked on in terms of that was, again, really understanding a couple of different customer personas, but ultimately kind of coming back to this woman who's in her 40s, 50s, and she is, she's very ambitious. She's a go-getter. She is either in a high-powered position or, she's like really the main decision maker at home. She really does take care of herself. And I think what do a lot of women fear? It's giving giving up control or like losing control. And so a lot of the messaging that we started to incorporate is this idea of like taking control back without having to go under the needle, right?
I
Because
love that.
yeah, so like that's kind of been like the underlying current. Even like the promotion we're doing in email and social now, all about like loving your eyes again, and like again, like almost like
I
coming
love
back to
that.
yourself. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which like this promotion has done insane things in the last week. I think she sold like over $45,000, so it's just crazy. So good.
How did you learn? Was that idea? I'm just as an example, like the loving your eyes again. Did you survey like her audience, or was it more like driven by the founder?
So actually, neither. It was the best thing ever that happened, which was one of her own customers created a video who is this stunning woman with stunning eyes and literally was like, I love this product so much. It has made me love my eyes again. Like I have loved my eyes my entire life. I'm now in my 50s. I feel like I couldn't recognize myself and it's made me love my eyes. And I was like, there you go. That's it. That's what we're running
That's
with.
it.
Yeah. And so this is
Sometimes
again,
like, yeah, oh my gosh, I love this so much because it's taking the messaging directly from the customer's mouth and putting it right on the page. And I cannot stress the importance of that. It's something that we do with all of our founders really early on is we're always we survey our audience. If you don't have an audience, we're kind of imagining who those right people are and surveying those people. So many people want to skip that step because they find it the boring step, and it's the most important step. And this is such a good example of that. So I love that you're sharing this.
yeah, steal that idea. I mean, I think you're exactly right. You know, when it comes to even feedback about your own brand, is like we get scared to say or to hear what people will say, but we need that feedback. Like leveraging what other people have said about us, like that reputation is actually going to be the most powerful thing, and that's because it ties back deeply into the principles of influence with social proof, right? Like we literally leverage what someone else said. You know, we put a video out about it on Instagram, on TikTok. We included her story in an email. We included the video in an email. That email alone has generated like over $7,000 in sales. You can see it in Klaviyo, like in one day. Like it's just
That's
crazy.
amazing. But I think, it does take having that second person like yourself to kind of spot that, because if you're in it in your business, it's very hard to be like, oh, that's it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So tell me a little bit more around or about like what you feel is sort of the biggest mistakes that brand founders might make when it comes to, turning their brand into something that really stands out, that has a unique perspective, that really stands out from the noise. Where do you think that the mistakes are made?
Yeah. Oh, geez. I have such a long list. Like, I want to be so gentle and kind about this, though. I don't want to call anyone out too harshly. But I think for me, it comes back to like, again, this is going to be really direct. It's just how I am. Like, are you willing to be hated? Like, are you willing for people? And I mean, of course, I don't want anyone to hate you, but are you willing for people to be like, ugh, no? On the other side of that is going to be ravenous fans, right? And I'm not going to mention what I'm working on, but you know what I'm working on and kind of my fears around that, even in the name of it. It gives me a lot of anxiety, but that also kind of tells me like, I think I should do it, right? So I don't want you to think about like, oh, I have to create something that people will hate, but I want you to think about how can I create something that people will have a reaction to? Like, is this something that anyone would be like, tell me more or no thank you, right? Like on the nicest level, would they at least say that? Because I think too many founders play in this gray space and then they're like, well, why am I not getting the influence? Why am I not taking off? Why is no one interested? Well, it's like, well, because you're just kind of blending in, if you're not willing to stand out, then I think it's going to be hard for you to get that influence and that success that you want. So I think that's like first and foremost, the question you've got to ask yourself when you're building the brand is like, is anyone going to be curious even about this?
Absolutely. Or maybe it's, I always ask our founders, like, what is the status quo that you're challenging? Or what do what do you feel like you go left on, or people go right on and you need to go left? Like, I'm just thinking about this one founder that I recently interviewed on here, and she kept coming back to this messaging and this intuitive hit around like the feminine divine and and it was interesting because in the many sessions that we had, it was a lot about like traditionalism of being a woman and the traditions of being a woman, which can be so off-putting in our culture of, women empowerment and like, women, having choice and freedom and all the things that are amazing. And she wasn't saying like that, those things are bad. She was just saying like, what about the things that I personally just feel like we've lost, maybe a sense of traditionalism, like the woman, like being able to kind of bring the home together, or like, homemaking, like slowing down, feeling like you can come in from and make choices from a feminine side instead of bringing in your masculine as a CEO, like all these things. And she went with it. She has continued to go with it, so much so that now that messaging is bringing all these connections for her with other women in her community. And every single event that she does, and she hosts a few events a month, are selling out. And then she's also selling her product on the back end. It's just been really cool to watch. So it's really listening to like, what is that intuitive hit of how am I challenging the status quo, or what do I want to challenge the status quo on? I think everyone is annoyed by something, like something pisses them off, right? Like, well, not to go off on a tangent, but one thing that I have recently has been coming through for me is this whole concept of like fail fast and fail fast, right? And it was written originally, there's a book that came out around, I think it was actually called like Fail Fast, or like something like Fail Fast. Who's the author of it? Oh my gosh.
I think you're right that it was just called Fail Fast. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And it was someone like it was a male writer from Silicon Valley. And, there was this whole movement in the media around like, you have to fail fast. You have to fail fast so that you can fix it and make, the next iteration. And as I grew my business, my product business and my consulting business, and I work with women, majority women, and I think you can probably attest to this, it's like, the idea of failing fast works if you're like single and like don't have anything else to do but fix the problems.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's also not how women work. At the same time, naturally, we tend to, give it more thought, number one. But number two, I was like, this ain't working for me. Like, I don't have time to fix it a bunch of times before. Let me build it right the first time, at least spend a little bit more time so I can be really intentional with it. So when I put it out, it's like 90% there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know. It's just something that is just bothering me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, what came to mind for me, I've heard this, I'm obviously not a hormone specialist or anything, but I've heard so many times that like we women are, if we're, I guess like before we're menopausal, we are literally 4 different women in a month. Right. And so I love the idea of like, just based on our cycle and everything. So what you might think is a good idea in your luteal phase, you might hate 3 weeks later. Right. And so even giving yourself that time to really sit with an idea for a month, like I have done this by default because I have 2 kids and I'm like going crazy over here with everything we've got going on. So everything is taking so much longer, but I'm like, okay, wow, I'm actually now kind of testing this between 4 different people. How is this idea really landing? So I think actually what you're thinking is brilliant. I think a lot of women relate to that. And like being a founder, an entrepreneur in a man's world, like most of that business advice doesn't even apply to how we even think, right? Or like how we make decisions. So I love that.
How we make decisions, how we operate. I like that, that concept of like the cycle, decision making based on cycle. By the way, I don't know, this might get taken out of the podcast, but I had a male mentor start talking to me about cycle driven decisions and operating based off of my cycle. And I'm like, okay, we're going to put a pause on this one. Like, I appreciate that. And it came from a good place. It really did. Like, he's the kindest person. But I was like, maybe leave this to the ladies. Like,
I don't need the mansplaining. No, I hear you. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a little, I'm like, I've heard of that. Okay. So going back to, this brand that you've really helped over the last few years, Intoxicated Cosmetics, did you have pushback on, like, hey, I really think we should take this messaging in this direction, or hey, I think we should try this? Did you get pushback?
I didn't get pushback, but I think this is very natural. She's wanted to do like bits by bits. So even email marketing, we officially signed on for that just recently. Whereas if it were up to me and I'm like, I see the incredible success you're having. So I think it is kind of like a mentality shift, especially someone who's been doing a lot on her own for 5 years, to have someone come in and be able to produce such incredible results, but still have a little bit of trepidation. I don't think I'm saying that word right, but just wanting to take it slow, right? And so, like, she wanted to do ads in the summer. And I said, we're not going to do ads until your website is done, which wasn't done until October, because there's no point to continue to pour money into something that's not converting. She was working with a previous agency and the ROAS was like 1.2. And honestly, that's like losing money, right? Because of cash flow issues. So I'm like, there's literally no point. So now we're starting to do ads. Now we're starting to do email marketing. And I think it's more when you work with the founder, when we do things on our own for so long and we do our best to learn everything and wear all of the hats, she kind of is her own target audience too. And so am I. I think that's why we work so well together. Is like, it's hard to let go of control. You know what I mean? It's hard to bring someone in, and it's like a very natural and understandable thing. So never received pushback. I mean, we literally, when she hit her $10,000, we sent out an email. 2 days later, she hit $10,000 off that email. And like, we literally got on FaceTime on Saturday morning and did shots. Like, like, that's how close we are, and she really trusts me. But I think it's important, from an agency perspective or a partner perspective, to take it slow, to not push, and to kind of continuously show what's possible. And that's what's important, like, to me and my husband who run Daring House, is we want long-term partners that are quality and few. We're not trying to like bring these projects in like on a conveyor belt and then get them out. Like, we want to be part of this growth. So I'd say it's been like a really beautiful partnership over the last 6 or 8 months.
That's amazing. And what about, like, I'm curious, like, was that the email with the woman that was talking about, like, I love my eyes again?
Yes. Yeah.
I love that so much. So since you work with beauty brands and you've seen, beauty brands, beauty and wellness brands do well, I'm sure you've seen, some falter here and there, but what's the one common denominator among the brands that actually make it long-term? Like, what do you see as like, this is what makes that brand successful?
Yeah. I think I'll speak to the sadness that I have in my heart for a lot of the brands that we worked with in terms of doing their, stunning branding and their initial messaging and their website, even their packaging. Like, multiple brands have gone through this. They invest so much upfront for their launch and they have $0 left for marketing. And I think that this is, you have to have both. If you cannot do it yourself, if you can't commit to it, if you've got other things going on in your personal life, you can't be consistent, you don't have the skills, you don't want the skills, you've got to find a way to have a budget for marketing. And I'm not going to say it takes money to make money, because people can make money out of thin air sometimes. I totally get that. But to pour in thousands upon thousands of dollars on creating this beautiful thing, not to mention formulation, not to mention like all of these other things, and then let the brand die because they have no money for marketing. Like, I hate to admit this, but like, I have done a good amount of free work just to be like, oh, let's just get there. Let's show you what's possible. But they're like, no, I literally can't. And I'm like, well, then this is a huge mistake. Like, you have to think about this kind of thing. I think, especially when you're starting out, but I think even if you've been in the game for a couple of years and you're like, I'm not growing. Well, at that point, it's like, you have to find a way to get help, and take your time, find the right help, hopefully develop those skills on your own. But this idea that I think that, like, as founders, as beauty founders, like, we have to know it all. We have to know the product and the formulation and the branding and the messaging and the marketing and wear all the hats. Like, it may get you somewhere, but is it really going to get you as far as you want to go as fast. So I think you have to make that decision at some point and figure out a way to make it happen, even if it's just a little bit. You've got to think about, how can I get this message out there? Because if it's not getting out there, what's the point?
Yeah, that's true. So that's a good segue into what I was thinking, in terms of, like you said, how do you get the traffic? And I hear this question all the time. Like, our founders are always like, how do I get traffic? How do I get traffic? So I have some questions for you. There's like many of them in terms of traffic, but do you feel that when you're really early stage, that the founder needs to be the face of the brand, or could it be somebody else, or does there need to be a face at all?
I think it depends. I think it all depends. I think that it really depends on the approach, right? And so if you are taking more of, I'm creating a movement based on my own experience, and you want to connect with people based on that, then yes, you probably need to be, the face. If it's you're standing for something, or you're shifting the status quo, and it doesn't necessarily require that personal touch, I think you've just really got to dial in on your messaging, as well as potential partnership opportunities, right? And so who else experiences these kinds of problems, and how can you connect with them to introduce them to your brand? I think that the face of your brand ultimately really should be your customer. And the more that you can get customer content, I'm actually saying I see a movement away, or I should say I want to see a movement away from UGC and influencers into RUC, real user content. Someone just puts it up, doesn't expect to get paid for it, and then you use that content, and then you send them free products, you pay them whatever. It can become a beautiful partnership, or they can just become a beautiful brand fan. So the more you're able to leverage that, I think that's really going to be the most influential thing, is that social proof.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of traffic, one of the things that a challenge that our founders encounter is, showing up on social, staying consistent with social, staying consistent with getting that traffic in. So my question to you is, with this brand and then with the other brands that you work with, how do they bring in organic traffic, before they turn on ads? What are they doing to bring in traffic?
Yeah, so many different things. I think you've got to have that foundation, right? So you've got to have what is the movement? What is the message? What do I stand for? How is this different? What is my positioning, right? My differentiators, all those core things that you talk about. You've got to have that nailed in. But then now, how do I get the traffic and get people to pay attention to this? It does take commitment and consistency, which are two principles of influence that we have to commit to as founders or marketers of our brands, right? So in those early days, if you want the traffic, you have to do the work. You have to just sit down and every single day focus on creating content, whether that's blogs or videos or YouTubes, or, engaging with other people, pitching yourself to be on podcasts. Is people see this creating content meaning all of those things, right? Not just Canva graphics, as additional work, but that is literally your revenue generating activity. If you are not doing that, if someone is not doing that for you, I don't think you can just expect to get the traffic, right? So I think committing to that, but then it's okay, but then what do we do? How, what's the approach that we take? I actually, with my obsession with beauty brands and in preparation for this podcast, and just kind of thinking about, what are some tangible takeaways, I kind of came up with a loose framework of things you can think about as you're starting to create content and starting to get people to pay attention to your brand. So if you'd like, I can definitely share that.
Oh, yes, please. Okay. Go for it.
Okay. So I think the first thing in terms of how do we get traffic, the shift that we're seeing in social media specifically, I'll say that these 4 things are around social. The first shift I want you to kind of consider is voyeurism, right? So it's I'm calling it loosely the VEC² framework. So if you want people to be hooked, think about the shows that you watch, whether it's Real Housewives or Severance or Great British Bake Off, whatever, right? Why do we keep coming back and paying attention to these things? Is because we want to watch something unfold. And so as you are either initially launching your beauty brand, or maybe coming out with a new product, or making a shift, whatever it is, how can you consider, like, how can I make people feel like they're literally watching me or watching what's happening? So whether that's creating a unique series, doing behind the scenes, kind of like, here's my journey, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, right? Like, a lot of that has worked, especially with a lot of like Gen Z brands. But I think people in general, like, we go on social media not to like be sold to, not to get a whole masterclass on like, all these various topics, but to be entertained, right? Half the time people are like on the toilet or in the bathtub. Like, so think about, like, how can I make them feel like they're watching a TV show if they happen to stumble upon my content? So that
Oh,
voyeurism
I like that.
piece. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So there's something there, because I literally just did a podcast episode this morning where the founder was talking about exactly this. So how she's like doing this docu-series with her mom, like customers, and her brand is like a postpartum pregnancy brand. I think I know I mentioned to you on our call, but she's doing this whole like docu-series, which I'm super stoked about. And so it's like apropos of what you're sharing around, like, just like, if it's not documenting your journey, it's documenting your customer's journey.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are so many creative ways and things that you can test, but I think it really is like, think about your content as, how can one piece build upon the next, right? How can I get people to come back and tell them this is a 5-part series or an ongoing thing or a thing we do every Wednesday? Like, literally say it in your content so people are like, okay, if I'm interested now, I'm going to be interested to come back. I think that is key to getting traffic.
Love that.
Thank you. Not something I made up. It's just like something I'm seeing that's happening, right? So then the next one is E, emotional experience. So here's like, you've probably heard, years ago, we were in an outcome economy and a transformation economy. Now we've been in an experience economy. So people aren't just buying, what your product does. Ooh, yes, lifts and tightens, great. What is the experience of your brand, and how can you start to show the emotional experiences? So again, those can be customer stories. Those can be, PR boxes that literally can create a different experience other than just like, I open the box and here's the product, right? So what are some other things that you can bring in that literally give people an emotional reaction? And it doesn't just have to be like tears or like, oh yes, I need that. Like, it can literally be, laughter. It could be humor. It can be so many different things, but really starting to think about, what emotions do I want people to feel, and how can I hook people in through emotions? I think that's another really big one for beauty.
Yes. Okay. So unrelated to beauty, but my husband just he has this Arc'teryx jacket that he's obsessed with. If you're familiar with Arc'teryx, like, if you know, he's had this jacket for a few years. They cost a ton of money. They're like $800. And he loves this jacket. And after like a few years, maybe it's been like 4 years, the zipper broke, and he was bummed about it because he couldn't, whatever. He's bummed about the zipper. Can't zip it up. It's winter. Anyways, he goes to the Arc'teryx store in Soho and came home and was like, I will never buy another jacket again from any other company but Arc'teryx. I'm a forever fan. And he's not into branding. He's not into products. He's not a consumer. Like, he never, ever, ever has bought anything off an ad. Like, he is the worst person for marketing or advertising on this planet. Like, nothing will target him. And yet they got him. He went into the store. There's 2 floors. The bottom floor in Soho is like a service center for Arc'teryx. They radio down being like, hey, there's a customer coming to fix their zipper, please, help him. They have a coffee bar in the back. They take his jacket. They give him like 50 colors to pick out from, like, for a zipper, or like a little, because it's like the zipper ending or something. 15 minutes later, they fix it in the back, bring it back out. And then what else did he say? He was like, oh, and then they apparently, like, if like he ever wants to get a new jacket, he'll never have to pay full price. They give you like a voucher, like it's like $300 to $400 voucher for a new jacket if his jacket breaks. It's like Patagonia times 10, like the whole Patagonia experience and how they
Right.
do, like they'll return it, they'll take it, they'll repurpose, whatever. There were some other things to it, but he came home, he's like, I'm never, like, I literally have his text. It was like, I'm obsessed with Arc'teryx and like, I'm never buying from anybody again. Like it was this whole thing, but it all came down to experience, right? Like it all came down to the experience and what he felt. He felt seen by a company. Really, that's what it came down to. He felt seen by a company that he'd invested a lot in, and they were investing back into him. So I love that you touched on that.
That's very powerful. So the next two, I call them C². The first one is craving. So again, how can we build not just on an emotional experience that's memorable, but something that people literally look forward to? And I think you really see this happening in beauty when it comes to incorporating food, right? Like we see this with brands like Rhode, it's huge, right? So we're really talking about sensory marketing here. So when we look at our media, we look at our videos, beyond just incorporating food, because that's taste, how can we start to incorporate like little signals, maybe like a little jingle that plays, at random points in our videos, or, if you're going to send a gift or send your product, is there a particular smell that can go along with it? So like if you have coffee in your, ingredients, like is there a coffee smell or a citrus smell, or can you include, I think like the silliest idea, but like honestly, those old like scratch and sniff stickers, like something like that is literally just not too much more expensive. Or if you're going to do tissue paper, like how can you make it like that tissue paper? I'm going to sound so like I don't really know what I'm talking about here, but like that tissue paper that's like really noisy. It's like almost like a thicker, shiny one. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it almost like sounds like tin foil in a way. And it's very, very annoying. It's probably more expensive, but again, it can create that experience, that craving that people are like, I want that. So, when you see big influencers getting those massive PR boxes, and you think to yourself, like, I want to have that, right? Or I see like Rhode does this so great. They're really killing the game when it comes to sensory marketing. They have a new product that launches and they make the entire campaign around, cinnamon buns, cinnamon coffee, all of those kinds of things, even creating like those huge experiences with pop-ups and things like that are centered around a particular craving, centered around our senses. I think with beauty, to be able to do that, especially if you're in the clean beauty realm and you're starting to incorporate like natural fruit extracts or essential oils, like this should be a no-brainer for you. So bringing some of those kinds of things in, and like really making them your, like what you're known for, right? Like the bookmarks to your social graphics, your reels, your TikToks, your, whatever you're doing. I think that's a really powerful way to get traffic as well.
Love that.
And then the last one is just community. And so when it comes to community, this is something people talk about all the time, like build community. Well, how do I do that? Again, you've got to know, what is my mission? What is the movement I'm trying to create? And how can I bring people in? I think a lot of times the mistake I see founders make, and I have definitely made, is like, we want to create the thing. We want to, post about it, and then we just want the people to come to us. But that's not actually how community building works. And so can you, if you want that traffic, to create community, plug yourself into the rooms or the spaces or, the partnerships or the influencers that you want to be a part of? And I think a lot of people, again, they're kind of doing marketing from their ego, and they're thinking, I'll put this out and someone will love it. And if they don't love it, that means something about me. And that's just not true. I think you've really got to say, how can I create a community? How can I give more? And it's not just about putting your post out with, this is what this ingredient does, and here's my before and after. But again, really fostering, taking the time to go comment on other people's posts, create a podcast and invite other people to it, try to add value to other people's lives. Even if you're building an email list, how can you start to share information that has nothing to do with your brand, but makes you all feel like you're part of a community with similar interests, similar things that kind of like get you going. And 100%. I think that's like another really important shift.
Like an I get you, we're in this together vibe.
Exactly.
I actually have this one founder who we were working on. She wanted to expand her influencer partnerships, and she had, had some already. we were working through, well, how do we grow this? And she happened to share like their outreach. I was like, what's the outreach process? And she shared the outreach process of how they were reaching out to influencers to invite them to be a part of the ambassadorship. And it was just this very like formulaic, cold way of like, what's in it for me type of approach. So we totally flipped it on its head. And I was like, let's shift this to more of a, relationship building, connection-based, long-term connection. And she's all about that to begin with. So it made total sense. So what she ended up doing, which I think is really fun, is she took it to the next level where I was like, why don't you take a look at their feed and look at like, what are they celebrating? What's something like their dog's name or like their kid or whatever. And she took it where she would find, or like her team member finds like something that they're celebrating, and she's sending a gift of her products as a means to celebrate something that they shared they were celebrating already. So it's like, hey, like we'd love to send you this box of goodies to celebrate your new dog or your new baby or your honeymoon or you getting your promotion or whatever that is that they're sharing about. Oh, you hit this many followers, whatever it is. It's like they're already celebrating and sharing about it. Like let's give, like sending them a gift to celebrate with them.
I love that.
So I like, so good.
Yeah. If I can share a crazy example, I mean, this is the power of community. One of our founders, one of our clients, they've integrated themselves into a kind of a community. I think it's on like Reddit or something like that, but is from a couple of TikTok influencers in the beauty realm, right? So they're, women, I think again in their 50s, looking for like, particular beauty products. They have a really strong community where they're sharing all sorts of recommendations. Well, this founder literally just last night, she's integrated with this community. She has been for probably 6 months or so. And so the power of being integrated with a community someone else has built, but you're kind of, you're on the periphery or you're a product that they recommend. So she did a TikTok live with a couple of these women last night. In 2 hours, she sold $22,000 worth of product. Really today, yeah, I saw the analytics and I was like, what happened? And so she told me. And so I'm like, this is the power where, maybe she doesn't have, tens and thousands of followers. Maybe she doesn't get much engagement on her post, but it doesn't matter because when you build trust with people and connect with people on a deeper level and you really commit to showing up for another community, and then when it's your turn and those people show up for you in 2 hours, like it's crazy.
So,
I think the focus is less on like, the likes, the comments, the followers. How do I get all this traffic to my page? And more like, how can I build relationships? How can I add value? Because that stuff does truly come back to you.
I think like what I'm hearing is high level, less transactional.
Yeah.
Like making it all just less transactional. All right, Sasha. So one last question for you. If a beauty founder, I feel like, you've given us so much, so this has been such a pleasure, but if a beauty founder could only focus on one thing to increase their influence this year, what would it be?
Hold on. Did I already say this?
It could be something you already shared, but it's kind of like dialing in on if our founders, like it's a community where our founders were bootstrapping brands, limited time, limited resources. So if there's one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing I would be focused on is, coming from, a woman who was born in the Soviet Union, like a natural revolutionary, I really would say, how can you disrupt the norm? What do you want to be known for? I think if you could really dial in on how you're different, how you're disrupting the norm, what you want people to know your brand for, like that's again, kind of like the seed that so much magic can grow from.
I love that. I think that's such a good point and such an important one. And how can people find you and where can they find you?
On Instagram is great at Sasha Fedunchak, and my business growth marketing agency is at Daring Haus, and the Haus is Haus.
Amazing. Thank you, Sasha, for this great session. So eye-opening. I think it's going to be really instrumental in helping people kind of start to rethink of how they have influence.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And until next time, thanks for listening to the Beauty and the Brand podcast. If you love this episode, please leave us a review. We read everyone and we so appreciate them. So thank you. Bye, everyone.